We got a question today coming from Harry from the Patreon page. And guys, if you haven't, consider checking out Patreon. I upload my training videos daily with commentary, and I host AMAs like this that I use for video topics like the one we're about to cover right now. So Harry said, I know there's a narrative which states you can powerlift or do strongman at any time, but is there a standard you recommend people reach before trying these sports so they don't feel disappointed? I imagine weighing 155 pounds with a 1,000-pound total might leave you feeling a bit pathetic after a strongman comp. So this is a very important question, and it's what a lot of people are faced with once they get into lifting culture and they start looking at competing. And everybody lifts for different reasons. So the first thing to do is to get right with what is your ultimate goal? And some people are in the process of figuring that out. They don't know right off the bat. They have to put a little bit of skin in the game before they can really have an opinion on that and decide if they're going to stick around for a while. So if you're, first of all, 155 pounds with a 1,000-pound total, that's not bad. Those are pretty good strength numbers for somebody who's new. Strongman really isn't a sport for 155-pound guys. They tried having very light weight classes, and you would get like 3 guys show up to nationals. There's just not demand for it. It's considered a sport for bigger people. It's considered a sport that prioritizes weight over all else. The weights are fixed. They are what they are. So if you want to compete in strongman, you have to change your body to meet the demands of the sport. So yes, you do have to look to gaining weight. You do have to make sure that you're able to do the events. When you start competing really has more to do with when you get experience and what type of experience you need at every given stage of development. So let's break this down. There's 2 perspectives we could take. One is we could bias towards starting as soon as possible, and the other is we could bias towards putting off competing until we're ready. If you start as soon as possible, you do gain experience much faster. You network more. And it also stokes the competitive fire and has a quality of pulling people in. Most people report once they compete, they fall in love with the sport, and that's when they really take off because they have something to train for. And that's a real thing. But it often leads to over-competing and less time spent doing the type of developmental work you need. The big problem with powerlifting, especially since there are so many divisions, and even brand new lifters will find themselves getting certificates or medals. It's very addicting. Powerlifters will find themselves going meet to meet to meet in the beginning because it's so exhilarating to engage in it, and that's all they want. Where you can't do 6 meets in a year and still have a ton of good quality, uninterrupted developmental work. So there is a case to be made for not jumping in early and not doing all of these meets back to back. If we bias towards putting off competing, it does give you more time to develop so that you can actually become competitive. But many put off competing until some day that never comes. I knew a guy who I've mentioned before, Phil Morris, very, very strong individual. His opening bench press at his first powerlifting meet was 550. And I remember for the longest time, Phil thought he didn't deserve to be in a meet. He wasn't competitive enough. There is actually value to people, even if you're not as strong as Phil was, even if your bench is only 185, there is some benefit to getting meet experience, even if you're not specifically competitive. Powerlifting, I would say less so. Most people jump in because they enjoy the experience of being in this competitive dynamic more so than they actually need all of this experience to figure out how to run a meet. There's a little bit, but most people get it within their first meet or 2. Powerlifting is a very low-tech sport. Contest nerves, sure, there's going to be things you can't keep straight, but it doesn't require a 300-page textbook to figure out how to run a powerlifting meet. It's technical, like making an omelet is technical. There's a right way to do it. And you won't know the first time you do it, but pretty much everybody figures it out pretty quick. Strongman, you can make a better case that experience matters earlier on. However, you run into the same problem with both, and that is the type of experience you get is not really relevant to brand new lifters. So I actually don't recommend starting as soon as possible, like within your first year of lifting weights. Many people do recommend that. I don't. Many use that as a tactic to try to hook lifters. I'm not oriented towards trying to get everybody and their mother to be a competitive lifter. It's not for everybody. It's a sport. And for it to be taken seriously, for it to do what it's supposed to do, paying your dues and kind of getting some skin in the game before you jump in, that is part of the developmental process. It's an important part. And if that's a difference between you sticking around or not, whether or not you competed right when you started lifting, you weren't going to be around long anyways. Brand new lifters need to learn a lot of things, a lot of basics, and many of the types of things you pull from meet experience aren't really applicable. They're not meaningful to somebody who's brand new to lifting weights. Now that's a pretty low barrier I'm setting. I'm recommending people just get out of the novice stage, just be familiar with the basic movements, have a very basic amount of strength development, like train long enough to have gotten a little bit stronger, so that you are actually in a position to actually take away the important stuff when you do compete in a meet. Even in strongman, you do run into that problem because the type of things you need to learn from meets, like how do I transition? How do I navigate using different equipment? Exactly how do I move my hands on a single finger? How do I transition from one implement to another in a medley? How do I listen for commands? All of those things don't matter if you're zeroing 3 or 4 out of the 5 events. So in strongman, you even do have a higher incentive to put it off because you don't learn anything from zeroing the events. That doesn't mean it's not a good experience. Doesn't mean you're not going to learn anything from the meet whatsoever. But you're not going to get those really valuable insights into how to operate in a meet and get the most out of that meet experience until you're actually moving with the implements. And that means you need a basic amount of strength to get the most out of it. I definitely wouldn't wait just because you don't think you're good enough. That's not a good enough reason. If you are firmly past the novice stage, if you know how to execute the lifts with good technical consistency, and you've developed some amount of excess strength. In powerlifting, once you're past the novice stage, I say go nuts. With strongman, once you can do most of the events, it's okay to zero 1 or 2 things. That's not a good enough reason not to go. But if that's kind of your experience, is just struggling with the basic implements, if the weights are over your head, you're best suited training long enough until you can at least maneuver the implements. You don't have to be super fast. You don't have to be super efficient. But if you can look at a contest that's coming up and you say, I can do those, go nuts, jump in, get the experience. So that is my basic rule of thumb for when you should compete. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Leave your questions in the comments or leave them, better yet, on the Base Strength Facebook page. It's absolutely free. We have a lot of good, helpful members there. So if you have any questions, you can take it there as well. And have you heard? I'm giving away Bullmastiff absolutely free. That was one of my prefabricated 10 programs that I gave in the Base Strength book that I put out. If you haven't gotten it already, I'm taking the 13 pages that describe Bullmastiff. It's turned into a pretty popular program. A lot of people have seen a lot of good results off of it. That is in the description. So go ahead and click that link and you can get that program for yourself and start running it. If you do, keep us updated. Fill us in with whatever PRs you hit, how the program went. You can drop it in the comments of any video. You can make a post on the forum. Let us know how it worked for you.